Is this the best way to communicate my message? Over the last few years, I have published hundreds of articles on the internet. I have supported thousands of writers grow their audience and income on Medium, and I've been editing one of Medium's largest publications, Better Marketing, where I review dozens of stories every single week, and I help writers make edits that turn their writing into content that actually gets discovered and loved by an audience. And in this video, I want to share with you the 5 questions I ask myself when editing the writing of my students and my clients. Those are simple questions, but they are questions that most people never really consider, and that's why their drafts and their finished articles often end up being confusing and not getting very many reads and views on Medium. So the first question that I want you to ask yourself when you are editing your piece and when you want to look at it from a different lens is, does the reader get your point? When I would review stories of my students, I basically ask myself, do I get it? Do I understand what the writer is trying to say? Do I understand the point of the story? This might sound so simple, but most of the time the answer is no, because a lot of new writers just get lost in their stories. They start with a specific topic or claim or promise, but somewhere along the story, while they're writing, they get lost and they include different stories into that piece. They have so much background information and details that are not relevant. They're pulling sources or information from different sources, and the story doesn't even end up making a lot of sense at the end. Um, when you read a story on Medium, you have to understand what the key point of that story is. If you don't have that key point, it's going to be very hard for you to attract a large audience because people are going to be confused. And if someone is confused, they won't follow you, they won't really come back to check out more of your work, they are not going to engage with the piece, and it's basically going to be a negative signal. The second question is actually very much related to the first one. And in the second part, I ask myself, does the story flow nicely? Do I when I read the article, does it take me from one point or from one sentence to the next one easily and smoothly? And that's not so easy, to be honest. As a new writer, your writing might not feel very natural. You might be trying a little too hard, but it's very important. And love to say that when you're writing an article, every sentence you write is kind of selling the next sentence. So you have to make sure that your story and your writing really flows, that there is a coherence and a consistency, and that you are taking your reader from the top to the bottom and to the end of the article without losing them. The harsh truth is good ideas are not enough, and good writing itself is really much more about having an idea and being able to execute properly and being able to tell the story properly, tell the story in a way that your reader doesn't get bored, but they're actually excited to read your entire piece. You also have to keep in mind that your readers are busy. They are giving you a couple minutes of their time, but if they open your story and within the first couple of sentences they realize that they don't really understand the story or it doesn't really flow, they have to go back to the introduction to get your point, you're losing them. They're going to be gone and they're not going to come back to your piece. The third question is a little tricky because what I ask myself here is, does it make sense? And I ask myself, does it make sense for a lot of different points in an article? I ask myself if a sentence makes sense on its own. Does the sentence stand on its own? And does each sentence make sense when you consider the sentences that came before and that come afterwards? Is there a consistent flow of thoughts? Does the story match the promise that you made in the title? And there are a couple different questions that you can ask yourself related to the question, does it make sense? The first one is, is the sentence or section necessary? Does it add value to the article? Does it make the article more interesting, more engaging, more personal? Or is it just taking up space without really adding much value? The second question is this the best way to communicate my message? If it's not, you probably want to do some editing there or just cut it off. And the third question is, could I make this story easier to understand? Could I make it more accessible? Could I make it simpler so that more people can benefit from my message? I guess you see a pattern here. A lot of my thoughts when editing an article are about simplicity. It's about making the story easy to understand and easy to digest. And you have to think about this in different ways. First of all, a lot of your readers might not be native English speakers. You still want to make sure that they get your story and that they understand what you're talking about. You don't have to use super simple language in order to achieve that. But even if somebody is a native speaker, they might be busy. They might be reading your article while they are out waiting for the bus or while they are waiting for their lunch to be served. They are in a headspace where they might be busy and they might want your content to be easy to digest. You don't want to assume that somebody has a lot of time to consume your content. You want to give them what they came for as quickly as possible. The fourth point is probably the easiest one. Do we need to fix any obvious mistakes? Are there any grammar mistakes, spelling issues, or typos, for example? We obviously want to get rid of all of those. I use the Grammarly Pro version, and it is a great help to help me spot those mistakes. And I highly recommend it, to be honest, especially if you're a new writer without a lot of experience. You don't need to take all the suggestions that spelling checkers or editing tools like Grammarly make when they make stylistic suggestions or suggestions related to voice and tone. You have to decide whether they make sense for you personally, but it's a great support to help catch grammar mistakes, spelling, and typo issues. And last but not least, speaking of medium stories specifically, I also encourage my students to ask themselves, does the story look good? And I really talk about the visuals here. Is the story formatted properly? Are you using headlines the right way? Are you using section breaks? Are you using the few formatting options that you have correctly? Do you have a compelling title image that you are allowed to use? Does your story provide a good and pleasant reader experience? A lot of people widely underestimate this, but readers are on Medium because the user experience they have on the platform is incredibly positive. There are no ads, there are no flashy images that are distracting you. It's a great platform to read, and your job as a writer is to make sure that your writing is aligned with Medium's biggest advantage of being a really clean and positive platform for reader experience. Because if your writing is distracting and you have a dozen images in a short post and your headlines are not formatted properly, it's going to be a negative experience for your readers. And to be fair, formatting your story on Medium is very easy. So make sure you get yourself familiar with all the formatting options and don't overdo it. Keep it simple. Make sure your story looks nice and is easy to follow. That's it. Those are my 5 quick editing tips. I hope this is useful. Let me know in the comments if you have any additional thoughts, if you have any editing tips for the community, and I'll see you in the next video.